New questions are being raised in the case of former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters. Her legal team went before the Colorado Court of Appeals to argue that she was wrongly convicted. Now, while they disagree about that, they are reconsidering the length of the prison sentence, thinking they gave her extra time based off of an error. Our 9 News legal expert, Whitney Traylor, joins us now to explain what this means and how this can play out in the future. Thanks for coming in.
Sure thing.
Okay, so they were in court yesterday, both sides talking about this. You listened to that hearing.
Yeah.
What came out of it?
Yeah, there was a lot that came out of it. This was the appeal of both her conviction and the length of her sentence. And so they were before the Colorado Court of Appeals. 3 judges were hearing that. And you can tell, they haven't issued an opinion, but you could tell what they're sometimes where they're leaning based on their questions and what they really focused on. And they seem to be dismissive of the wrongful conviction. The wrongful conviction will stand. There was a lot of evidence. This was a jury that came back and resulted in that conviction. The issue that they seemed to really stick on and really kind of push the prosecutors was on the length of the sentence. And that was primarily because the judge, it was within the sentencing guidelines, but it was a steep sentence to have 9 years because it could have been probation. There was no mandatory minimum. And so here, during the sentencing, she went on kind of a diatribe and went after the judge and stuck to her guns. And the judge, it seemed like maybe was responsive to that and sort of maybe used that as a basis to actually make such a steep sentence. And so that was the piece that the Court of Appeals was really focused on.
It sounds like maybe there was an error with, I don't know, wording that made, they said it was a felony, but maybe it should have been a misdemeanor, which is a change of about 15 months.
Yes.
When it comes to the sentence. How much time? I mean, I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, she was sentenced to 9 years, but good behavior and all that kind of stuff. How early could she get out?
Well, right now on her papers, she's eligible for parole December of 2028. So that's about half of the sentence. But as you mentioned, with good behavior, because this was a nonviolent crime, they can reduce, I think it's 10 days of every month. So she could be eligible in March of 2028, assuming there's no commutation or pardon from the governor.
And that's if the same years apply, right? Like, will they change it based off of this, like potentially 15 months being too long?
Correct. That's if the 9 years stands. So if the Court of Appeals reverses that and says, no, it should be less, you take off those 15 months and remands it down to the lower court, then that could reduce it even more so, for sure.
What about President Trump's pardon? Will that have any effect on the case?
No, none whatsoever. And this was purely symbolic and just more Trumpism, if you will. These are all state charges. And the pardons, the president can only pardon federal charges. So, and her lawyers tried to make the argument and say, hey, well, George Washington did it with the Whiskey Rebellion and there were state and federal charges. But that was a really weak argument. And in fact, he didn't even make it during oral arguments. He didn't even, that was in his papers. He didn't make that argument yesterday.
So what happens next in this case? Like with maybe potentially changing the length, are they going to come back to another court hearing about it?
No, so the Court of Appeals will rule and they may say, hey, this was improper, and they may remand it down to the lower court. They may actually reverse and take off those 15 months. And certainly there could be an appeal. And if she loses at the Court of Appeals, she could appeal to the Colorado Supreme Court, but she's not guaranteed a hearing at the Colorado Supreme Court. They have to accept writ of certiorari, which is very rare. I don't know if they would in this case. So we'll have to see what the Court of Appeals does.
How quickly does that decision come?
It depends. The Court of Appeals, that could be within a month.
Wow.
Yeah, so we would see something, I think, fairly soon.